Friends, this is an entirely unexpected invitation to address you. I thought I was coming here to listen to experts and didn't realize that the first non-expert to be called would be me. Nevertheless, it is a very great honor to be asked to deliver these introductory remarks. I won't call it a speech, I'll just call them remarks. The reason why we need to understand and remember the origins of our Constitution is that Constitution is currently under very severe attack. If the attack had been direct, upfront, then there would have been one kind of reaction. But it is not direct or upfront. It is indirect, it is subtle, and it is aimed at undermining the Constitution. And those who are attempting to undermine this Constitution have a very clear idea that the way to do it is to upset the balance in the Constitution. The balance consists of pitting different institutions against each other to produce the balance. So you, in the first instance, have a parliament. But the parliament itself functions on the basis of an adverse relationship between the government and the opposition. So unless there is a contest on the floor of the House, there cannot be democracy. That there has to be a fair fight between the opposition and the government. And the job of the opposition is not to endorse the government's program. Yes, there will be occasions when it seems as if it is in the largest national interest for the opposition and the government to be on the same side. As, for example, when the liberation of Bangladesh took place, nobody expected Mr. Vajpayee to stand up in Parliament and criticize Mrs. Gandhi. So he rose to the occasion and he described her as Durga Mata. So there are occasions, but exceptional ones, in which the government and the opposition come together under our Constitution in Parliament. Most of the time and much of the time, they are expected to present alternative views. Now, these alternative views can range from walking out to, but not walking in, walking out to speaking in the House, to voting against, even when you know that the vote for is going to be larger than the vote against. And for all this to happen, you need to have a completely impartial speaker presiding over the proceedings in the Lok Sabha and a completely impartial non-party vice president or chairman of the Rajya Sabha presiding over the Rajya Sabha. Now, I'll give you an example of what is meant by impartiality. For one thing, the person who becomes speaker is required to not have a political party. And equally, the Vice President of India has to be without a party, even if it is some party or the other which supports him and enables him to become the Vice President. So Mr. Somnath Chatterjee became the Speaker of the Lok Sabha in 2004 after demitting his office, which he had held for 9 terms continuously, as a member of the Communist Party of India, Marxist. And then when in 2007, the Communist Party of India, Marxist, decided to withdraw its support from the Manmohan Singh government on account of their disagreement with his agreement on the US nuclear deal, then he was asked by his party or his former party to leave the chair. And he refused. He said, I no longer belong to the CPIM. I have declined the post, and therefore I am not going to believe a party whip. And the party expelled him. But he continued to be an absolutely objective, non-partisan chairman of the House as Speaker. And in a similar way, we had seen in the Rajya Sabha that when Mr. Venkaiah Naidu was nominated by the BJP as its candidate for the vice presidency, he was in tears. And when asked, why are you in tears on this occasion when you're being elevated? He replied that all my life I've been with the BJP. And now I'm required to resign from it. And I won't be allowed to take office under the BJP again. And so he fulfilled the expectation of the Constitution that he would not be partisan, that he would be an absolutely impartial chairman of the House, which is ex officio occupied in the Rajya Sabha by the Vice President. So these are examples of how balance is to be brought between different institutions. The Speaker is not supposed to be the Prime Minister's puppy dog, nor is the chairman of the Rajya Sabha expected to talk in party language. So that's an important balance that needs to be preserved. Equally, there are institutions beyond Parliament. One is the executive. The executive is supposed to be partisan. By definition, the executive is the government. But its existence depends upon the approval of the Lok Sabha. And if it loses the confidence of the Lok Sabha, then the executive goes. So the executive is thus made responsible to Parliament. And while it comes into existence because there is a majority of that party which selects its leader or elects its leader as the head of the government, if that balance is broken, as perhaps it was when Rajiv Gandhi brought in the anti-defection law and put it in the 10th Amendment, now if you defy a whip, at the time of voting, you can be expelled from Parliament. So that move was undertaken because Indian democracy had become notorious for what were called ayarams and gayarams. And it was to stop this business of people defecting from the party in which they'd been elected to become ministers in another party that the legislation was introduced. But it has, compared to, say, the United States or the United Kingdom, curbed the independence of members of Parliament who cannot vote against their government without perhaps losing their seats. So that balance has been disturbed somewhat. So I'm trying to be also non-partisan here, that it is the spirit of the Constitution that even within Parliament there are checks and balances. And then to prevent Parliament from becoming authoritarian instead of being democratic, there are institutions that exist specifically to check the executive. But they also have the duty of checking the legislature. For if the legislature passes by whatever majority a law that is held to be ultra vires the Constitution, then that law is set aside. So you cannot have democracy without an absolutely independent judiciary. And when chief justices, after giving a judgment in favor of the government's position, are made members of parliament in a nominated capacity within a couple of weeks, and when every judge in the Ayodhya case is given a high position later, including the Muslim judge who is now the governor of Andhra Pradesh, you can see that if there is a conflict of interest where the judiciary is rewarded or punished for a judicial decision, then that judicial decision has a great question mark over its integrity. There are other institutions of a similar kind. We have, for example, or perhaps the most important example, the Election Commission. The Election Commission is not supposed to be an extension of the government. It's a constitutional office. The government may have a role in appointing the election commissioner or the election commissioners, but once they are appointed, they're supposed to be absolutely independent. And Sri T.N. Seshan made a big name for himself when he was known as the Alsatian that was barking and biting outside Nirvachan Sadan. And he was perhaps the golden example of demonstrating very, very ostentatiously the independence of the Election Commission. Of course, he compromised his position when, after resigning from or retiring from the Election Commission, he went to the Shiv Sena and asked them to run him as their president. But whereas his performance as the... Yes, sorry? Okay. Whereas his performance as the Chief Election Commissioner has been commended as an example of democracy in action, his trying to run in a partisan capacity for the highest office in the land has diminished his standing. So if any of these institutions, and I could go on to the Comptroller and Auditor General and give you examples of how they can be partisan, and if they are partisan, they might be rewarded, as against the earlier CAGs whose impartiality was taken for granted. Until and unless all these institutions are able to maintain a balance among themselves, whatever is written in the Constitution ceases to have effective meaning. And what is happening now is that the Constitution is being respected even to the extent of declaring the 26th of November, which is the anniversary of the passage of the Constitution by the Constituent Assembly, as a national holiday, Remembrance Day. If institutions such as the Speaker, such as the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha, if institutions like JPCs and parliamentary committees are made into partisan organizations by doubtful decisions by the chairman, if the independence of either the EC or the judiciary is undermined by offering favors or threatening punishments if they don't follow the executive, then even if you prostrate yourself at the steps of parliament before entering it, and even if you go on muttering that you hold the Constitution in high esteem, unless that is reflected in both thought and action, democracy is in danger. And I've been given this opportunity, so let me leave you with a thought that democracy in India today is in grave danger because the Constitution, not in its letter necessarily, but certainly in its spirit, is being undermined by every trick in the book and many which are not even in the book. And that is why this seminar is of the highest importance. Thank you for having invited me. I'm very grateful to you. Jai Hind.